Hi. Okay, so today I would love to talk with you about compassion. Now, why is compassion so important? It's literally the first ingredient to healthy living. It's the first ingredient to be in interactions with people, with your children, with your spouse, with your boss, with your employees, anyone you come in contact with. Now, why is it so important? Now, let's go into the brain aspect and then the soul aspect. So, let's talk about first what happens in the brain when a person deals with a difficult situation. Now, a difficult situation can basically means when your brain goes into mushy mind syndrome. Now, this is something that Miriam Yerushalmi talks about. She's coined the phrase mushy mind syndrome, and that basically means that the brain is not strong enough to choose what thoughts it's going to allow into its mind. And we know that mind, the thoughts, create the emotions. So naturally, if you're feeling something, if you're feeling difficult, if you're feeling anxious, it means that you're thinking anxious thoughts. Now, it could be on a subconscious level, you could be not aware of it, but that's the idea. So, mushy mind syndrome can be caused by what you eat. It can have a corroding effect on the brain. We know that gluten, for example, sugar, for example, these things really corrode at the brain, and gluten's been found to shrink the brain. Sugar enters the bloodstream with no filter. So it's literally spikes you, it doses you, it's a drug. um, and overeating, we know, and we can get into this another time, what things can really have this sort of effect in terms of nutrition. That's a very big part of CBTT. But in terms of it could also be stimulus, external stimuli. It could be something threatening that the brain has deemed as a dangerous or a difficult situation, and it's a threat. And when someone's under threat, inside or outside, when the brain's not strong, then it's going to go in stress mode. It's going to go in fight or flight. And this is so common. And it can be in so many varying degrees, and people can deal with stress and danger in different ways. Some people will go on complete lockdown, like shut off, completely reject the world, completely stay in a bubble, just don't want to hear anything. You know, there might be physical maladies that come out, like numbness, shivering, coldness. Things like this can really come into effect. You've got the fight or flight, so running away, or you've got really confrontational and aggressive. So people can really deal with stress in different ways and threats in a different way. But what happens to the brain is still the same. And I'll explain to you what happens. So first, it's important to know it doesn't matter if it's real or if it's imagined, we're talking about your brain. So it could be a shameful experience, something that was traumatic, and it really affected you, and you might not even realize, like, you went through a situation, let's say, where people were laughing and you walked into the room and you started feeling this social anxiety, like, oh my goodness, they're thinking about me, it must be the way I'm dressed, I knew I shouldn't have worn this today. It could be something like that. And in reality, you might be able to know that they're not really talking about you, but something like that, even if you know better, this traumatic experience, this shameful feelings that filter into your brain will now basically, if you don't have the strength in your brain, it will completely start to corrode, and you're in this threat mode, and you deal with it however you deal with it. But in your brain, all these positive pathways that you've built up over time, these positive connections in your brain, good behaviors, good mindset, positive thinking, all these things have now essentially disintegrated. A lot of it is just gone from your brain. And so it doesn't matter how much you know, it doesn't matter how much people tell you what you should be doing. These things aren't going to work in a time like this. And that's because the brain has lost its capacity. All these circuits have gone on frazzle. It's like a fuse. When you're in your house and you plug in an extra appliance that takes up way too much energy, and the whole place goes black, dark. So that's what's going on in a person's brain. Now, this is why it's so important to have compassion. Now, there's a doctor, Miriam talks about him. I'll have to remember his name. I think it was Dr. Ross Green. Who said, he's a famous child psychologist, and he says that the empathy, which is compassion, is the key that unlocks a code in a child's brain. Now, what is this unlocking? What's being unlocked? What is this thing? And what's this key to unlock a person's brain is compassion. And essentially, the message that's there is, I'm not an adversary. I'm an advocate. Now, when you know that this person in front of you is not against you, is not a threat, is not judging you, is not looking at all the things you're doing wrong, then you start to feel more comfortable, more safe, and you can really start to settle down. Because, again, our brain is in complete threatened mode. So that's why you don't tell someone all the things that they're doing wrong. You don't tell a person all the things that they should do to get their life on track. They might know all of this. Information's not going to help. So compassion is the key to switch this threat response. That's what's happening in the brain. Let's take it deeper. Let's go into the soul aspect, and let's hear what the Torah has to say about this. Now, the Torah, our beautiful, beautiful Torah, tells us, Yaakov pada es Abraham. Now, if we remember the story of when Abraham gets chucked into a pit of fire after the idols, where he bashed down all the idols, and he was taken to the king by his father, no less, taken to the king to be judged and killed, basically, for treason or for disrespecting their gods. What was he sentenced to? To be thrown into the fire and die and burn, tied up. Now, the crazy thing that happened is he came out of there completely unscathed. He had not a burn on his head. Nothing was affected. His whole body was not affected by this fire. Even the ropes that were tying him down had burned. So there was fire, but he just wasn't affected by it. Now, that's a miracle. And what's given it as an explanation, what actually happened, how did Abraham get saved and why? The explanation is Yaakov pada es Abraham. That Abraham was saved, but for the fact that he would have a grandchild in the future, and this grandchild would be Yaakov Avinu. And the Chassidus goes into it a bit deeper than that, and it brings it down to the traits of the people involved. The trait of Yaakov is compassion. That's his midah. Now, Abraham is the chesed. We know that his attribute is kindness. So essentially, the deeper message of what's happening in the background in this story, in this interaction, is compassion is what comes down and redeems the Abraham. So essentially, that message is compassion. When we have compassion for ourselves, when we have compassion for another human being, then not even that, actually, it's also everything. When we have compassion for anything, when we have these positive, good thoughts, even about water. The cells in the water change from and they grow. Plants grow with compassion. Everything grows from a molecular level, from the wavelengths of light that are behind every single creation. Having compassion, having compassionate thoughts, really gives birth to positive growth around you. And so how much more so when you have it with yourself? How much more so when you have it with your child or your husband or whoever's in your life? So to have compassion is this amazing gift that Hashem is teaching us. And I have to backtrack to where I was at before I went on that tangent. Yaakov Padias Abraham. So this compassion that redeems our soul. So when we want to redeem our soul, when we want to bring out the best life that we can live and the best life that our children and our family and our water, the things that we put into ourselves, our drink, our everything around us, when we want to have positivity surrounding us, we need to have compassion first, because thinking your way is not going to get you there. We know that now. Having compassion will, because it breaks so many barriers. It comes straight down through all the blockages, all the doors, and it comes and pulls us out. Now let me explain how it does that. When we are suffering, now we already explained we can be suffering for a number of reasons. Someone did something to us, it wasn't fair. Anything. I ate the wrong thing, I didn't get enough sleep. Whatever it is, we're suffering. So now that we're suffering, okay, we are not actually alone. That's something important to remember, because again, it's very easy for us to think that we're alone. Everyone else is either doesn't understand or is a threat, and so there's nothing for me to resonate with and to start to feel safe and comfortable and settled with. But we have to remember that we're actually not going through this alone. And I'm here to tell you that when you suffer, you're not alone. Hashem is down in the depths of this world, through every choice that you make, through every interaction that you are a part of. Hashem is with you. And so when you're suffering, God is suffering too. Now, what happens when I suffer? It's so easy for me to switch off or, procrastinate, put something else in front of me, get a stimulus so that I don't have to think about what difficulties I'm going through. And then the pain kind of leaves from my immediate feelings. And people can live their whole life like that. But something that they don't realize, first of all, it's stopping you from reaching your goals. It's stopping you from living the life that you're able to live, you're capable of living. And it creates blockages. But on the other hand, something people don't realize is Hashem is in excruciating pain with you. So while we can be procrastinating and putting other stimulus in front of our face, why don't we have a little bit of compassion for the pain that Hashem is going through? His pain is pure, unadulterated, undistracted, just pure, straight pain. For the pain that his children are going through, that we're, away from him, that we're going through physical pain or emotional pain, whatever it is. We're his children. He doesn't want us to suffer. But also, on the other hand, that he is in pain from being separated from himself. Now, ultimately, what we want to do is bring unity to Hashem. There's a part of Hashem we know now is always with us, and there's a part of Hashem that's up in Shemayim, and that's the holier level. So when we do things healthily, let's say, living a healthy life, being happy, bringing joy, doing, living in healthy bodies, being whatever it is, we're living healthy. We're doing mitzvahs. then what happens? We bring unification to the names of Hashem. And so that's ultimately what we want to do, because we bring them back together in unison, like a married couple. Hashem's Shekhinah is down with us. So when we are suffering, Hashem's suffering on account of his dear children and on account of himself, his wife, that's missing, right? So when so this is something that I encourage us to think about when next time we're going through a difficulty, and it will happen because we're human and it is the human condition, but this is something you can think about, and it's very helpful, and it's very, very, very very amazing in its Yeshua. And let's go a bit deeper in this thought. Now, Hashem made a promise with himself, right? That when you call in compassion for yourself, for your dear neshama, for the true you, for the Abraham who is in you, and you feel for compassion for somebody, in compassion for somebody else, and the difficulties that they're going through, then, and the soul that they have, what it must be experiencing. And even more so when you feel compassion for Hashem, that he's down in the dirt and he doesn't want to be here, and it's not because of anything that he did wrong. Feel sorry for him, feel compassion for him. So when you feel compassion, then Hashem made an oath with himself, the 13 attributes of mercy, that the 13 attributes of mercy will come down and redeem us from the dirt that we are in. Dirt, darkness, heaviness, difficulty, this suffering that we're in. And I'll tell you why this is so important. Because a lot of the time, people will be suffering and they'll be thinking, Hashem, please help me. And they'll be praying and they'll be giving tzedakah. And this is all so amazing, so amazing. But there's something missing. If you're praying to Hashem and Hashem is down in this suffering with you, then how are you expecting him to save you when he's stuck in the same place you are? It's so difficult. So this is why we have to understand, this is why we call to the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim, because Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei, is stuck with us. So both of us need this redemption, me and God. So when we call to Hashem, I already explained, the way we can do it is feeling compassion for our soul, feeling compassion for this human condition, that I'll make mistakes, that it's just nature, that I have an animal soul, and that I have all these desires or these negative character traits that come up in my interactions and really affect my life, and the lives of the people I care about. Whatever it is, when you think about yourself in a compassionate way, you think about what your soul is going through, this pure being that's, stripped off its princely robes and down in this material world, like, you feel sorry for it. So when you think in this way, when you're compassionate for your neshama, then the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim comes down and redeems you. Because midah keneged midah, you've activated a spiritual power, you've activated such a redemption, a power of redemption, and from below you've initiated a redemption call from above to come down. So there's such power, we have such power, and Hashem has shown us the way. So I want to also tell you about where you can think about this. Now, it's so important to put prayer into your day-to-day. Now, prayer means meditation, means talking to Hashem and really allowing your brain to mull it over, to think, to pause, to contemplate. So when you do this sort of prayer, this is like a real service of the mind. So a place to think about what we just talked about today: having compassion, Yaakov Padas Abraham, compassion on my soul, compassion on Hashem, compassion on my child who's screaming his head off and not listening, compassion for my husband who's on his phone and not paying attention, compassion for myself that something came up in work today and really dumbfounded me. Whatever it is, these are all hypothetical. Whatever it is that you're going through, think about it in this way. And where you think about it in prayers, in your davening every morning and mincha time, is in Ahavat Olam, right before Shema Yisrael. And this is a guarantee. The Rebbe said that when you come to Hashem in this paragraph, when you talk to him, this is like the most compassionate time. This is such an opportunity of compassionate energies that's flowing, that Hashem has given us every single day, not just once. And so it's really in our best interest to start, and in God's interest, who's stuck with us, it's our interest to start contemplating, to pause a little bit, you know? You're not going to be able to meditate, you're not going to be able to think long, but something, you know, allow it to start building up day after day, week after week, and think it over. Try to imagine to the best of your ability these concepts that we've talked about, and having compassion to come and redeem us, you know, compassion for the soul, my soul's journey, compassion for Hashem and his difficulty, compassion for these people that I'm interacting with. And then when you're thinking that, Hashem said that don't worry, my dear, I made a commitment, I made an oath, and you're going to be saved, you're going to be rescued. So this is a time where you can talk to Hashem and tell him all your problems. You can tell him all the difficulties you're facing in your life. You can go into detail. And this is where the magic starts to happen. But again, it starts with compassion. And so the Rebbe himself said that when you do this, it's a guarantee, because more than any person that you know, more than any person who keeps his word, Hashem keeps his word. If he makes an oath, we know not to worry. We know it's going to happen. And so, B'ezrat Hashem, you can use this more and more in your day-to-day, and think about this more and more. Think about the people who are suffering around you, people who are playing up, who are maybe not so nice, do hurtful, mean things, or who just don't listen, even when you've talked to them about something that's important to you. Whatever it is, think about it, and really the ultimate is to start to allow this compassionate thoughts to come in, and to not let your anger take reign of your being, to not let all the reactions that want to come out to take over into your interactions, so that you have compassion for the people who are around you and for what they may be suffering that may be causing them to be like this. So, because again, an neshama is a beautiful, pure being. An neshama doesn't hold a grudge. An neshama doesn't want to bring pain on somebody else. An neshama will listen. So, if a person's not doing all these things, you know that they're going through something difficult, whether they know it or not. So, it's all about compassion. And this is how we'll bring redemption, B'ezrat Hashem.